And welcome to the Arizona's Family First Alert Desk. I'm Morgan Lowe. This is Amy Cutler. We have breaking news, a verdict in the Lori Vallow murder trial. Amy and I have covered this trial. Amy, what happened?
It was guilty on all counts. It came after the jury deliberated for really not that long.
7 hours.
Yeah, I mean, it's a stunning verdict that happened in a Boise, Idaho courthouse. And we want to play that verdict for you right now.
Has the jury reached a verdict?
Yeah.
Very well. If you have the verdict form, I'd ask the bailiff bring that over here and we'll have it brought to the clerk to be read. The defendant would please rise.
We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn to try the above entitled action for our verdict, unanimously answer the questions submitted to us as follows. Question number 1. In regards to count 1 of the amended indictment, is Lori Noreen Vallow not guilty or guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Tylee Bryan and grand theft by deception? Answer, guilty. Question number 2. In regards to count 2 of the amended indictment, is Lori Noreen Vallow not guilty or guilty of first-degree murder of Tylee Bryan? Answer, guilty. Question number 3. In regards to count 3 of the amended indictment, is Lori Noreen Vallow not guilty or guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Joshua Jackson Vallow and grand theft by deception? Answer, guilty. Question number 4. In regards to count 4, the amended indictment, is Lori Noreen Vallow not guilty or guilty of first-degree murder of Joshua Jackson Vallow? Answer, guilty. Question number 5. In regards to count 5 of the amended indictment, is Lori Noreen Vallow not guilty or guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Tammy Daybell? Answer, guilty. Question number 6. In regards to count 7 of the amended indictment, is Lori Noreen Vallow not guilty or guilty of grand theft? Answer, guilty. Dated this 12th day of May, 2023, signed by the presiding officer.
All right, and that was a look inside the courtroom, which is interesting because it's the first time we've actually seen inside the courtroom. We've only been getting audio recordings of what happened day by day.
Yeah, and that's been different in the way that we've covered this case because there were no cameras in the courtroom. They did record the audio, and what would happen sort of behind the scenes is at the end of the day, after all the testimony was done, they would consolidate that audio and send it out to newsrooms across the country like ours, and then we would listen to the audio and put together our reports for the newscasts in the afternoons and the evenings. So, guilty on all counts after just 7 hours of deliberations. That was something. They believed the prosecution and did not believe the defense. There wasn't much of a defense here. The defense rested without calling a single witness. But prosecutors and defense attorneys had some, pretty convincing closing arguments yesterday.
Yeah, it was interesting. Over the last 5 or so weeks, the prosecution called some 60 witnesses, and then to have the defense just rest without calling a single witness, there's a strategy there.
Yeah, so there's a question, who would the defense call? All of Lori Vallow's closest friends had already been called to testify for the prosecution. Her sister was called to testify for the prosecution. Maybe they could have called somebody who would talk about cults and maybe how Lori was brainwashed or Lori was lulled into supporting or lying for Chad. Those are some of the things that the defense attorneys talked about in their closing arguments, but they decided first to asked for a directed verdict, meaning they asked the judge to throw the case out without even going to the verdict. The judge denied that motion. They did their closing arguments. It went to the jury, and the jury came back for the prosecution.
That's right, and it was guilty on first-degree murder in the deaths of Lori's two children,
Yep.
JJ and Tylee, and then it was conspiracy to commit murder in the death of Chad Daybell, her new husband's former wife. Ted.
Yeah, and there was verdicts of guilty of first-degree murder of JJ and Tylee, and guilty on conspiracy to commit first-degree murder in the deaths of JJ and Tylee. Now that conspiracy charge has a little lower bar. To find someone guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, the jury would only have to find that Lori aided and abetted in the plot to murder them. Didn't really take part in it. But the guilty of first-degree murder, the jurors had to find that Lori orchestrated these murders, that she was the impetus. She played a pivotal role in the murders. And as we saw, the jury found for all of the above. Now, this case has been going on for 3.5 years, and two of the principal voices in this case, the two voices that sort of got the word out to begin with that these two kids were missing, Tylee and JJ, were Kay and Larry Woodcock. Now, Kay is JJ's grandmother, and Larry is JJ's grandfather. Back in the fall of 2019, Kay began calling reporters, getting private investigators, trying to get some publicity, trying to get the police to look into what at that point she thought was just odd, that she hadn't heard from her grandson. She hadn't been able to talk to her grandson. She was the impetus for this case to get started. She and her husband, Larry, were outside of the courtroom right after the verdict, and they gave us some reactions. So we're going to play some of what they had to say right now.
Nothing that was an outburst of any kind or anything like that. That's according to our investigation in Boise, Idaho. So definitely.
All right, so this is video of outside the courtroom. We're going to cue up some video of Kay and Larry walking up. That's obviously not Larry Woodcock right there. I will just say that having spoken to both Kay and Larry multiple times over the years, the relief that they felt in this verdict, the satisfaction that they conveyed that this was justice for JJ and Tylee, it was overwhelming for them. They've been there every step of the way in this case. They were in the courtroom every single day. Kay testified in the trial. Larry was there to support them. So we're going to play what their reaction now. In just a second. Yeah.
Some technical difficulties here.
Okay, here, no, that's not them either. Okay, so this is live, not live
Yes.
television, but live media here. So
Yes.
while they're working on that, let's talk about what's ahead in this case. So the verdict came down today. What's next in this case?
Well, the sentencing obviously will come. That is 3 months from now is when the judge set that date. And then she's going to be extradited back here to Arizona to face charges in connection with her ex-husband, Charles Vallow's death.
Yeah, and that's been a question that's been hanging over this case since the beginning, because Lori was first indicted in Idaho for the murders, for the trial that just took place. So the first indictment gets to go to trial first. Then she was indicted in connection with the death of her former husband, Charles Vallow. And so Maricopa County has sort of been waiting in the wings to see what happens in this case. I reached out to the Maricopa County Attorney's Office this morning asking, hey, what are you going to do? Are you going to extradite her to Arizona? And they said yes. Now, specifics, we don't know. These plans are sort of in flux. Part of it depends on what the procedures are in Idaho for extraditing somebody. But just because somebody faces charges in multiple jurisdictions doesn't automatically mean that they're going to go to trial in those jurisdictions. Oftentimes, if there's a big conviction like there was in Idaho today, the other jurisdictions will say, we're going to dismiss these charges because justice has already been served. We don't want to bring the victims through the ringer. We don't want to spend the money, the resources that it costs to do these cases. Maricopa County Attorney's Office says, no, we are going to bring her here to face justice here. So that's a big development today.
It is, and it really, as the case has gotten so much attention, initially Charles Vallow's death was ruled as self-defense. And that changed after all of this started, the investigation really kind of took shape in Idaho.
Yeah, initially we were told that this was a domestic fight, Charles Vallow and Alex Cox in Lori and Charles's rental home in Chandler, and that Alex shot Charles in self-defense. Now, behind the scenes, Chandler police kept the investigation going, but outwardly they said that this was initially a case of self-defense, and it took a long time for those charges, that investigation, to come together. There is some controversy about whether Chandler PD should have moved quicker, because there was evidence at the scene, according to first responders, that Alex Cox's description of the events that led to the shooting were not consistent with what the first responders were seeing, and that what he described in the shooting was not consistent. And they also said that when they arrived at the scene, there was no, I don't mean to be too graphic here, there was not much blood around the victim. And Alex had told the 911 operator that he was doing chest compressions to try to revive Charles. That would have sort of created a little more of a blood area around the victim. So there were questions. Alex Cox was not arrested. He went on 2 months later, according to investigators, to murder Tylee and JJ.
And it's interesting because during trial, we saw several first responders from the Chandler area testify, which was kind of interesting and not necessarily what we had first expected.
Right. Oftentimes in these cases where there are a specific group of charges, prosecutors and defense attorneys keep it just to those specific charges. But in this case, we got a preview of what a Charles Vallow murder case would look like, of what Chad Daybell murder case is going to look like, because they talked about all of these victims. And who are these victims? Charles Vallow, who was Lori's husband, Tylee and JJ, Lori's youngest two children, and Tammy Daybell, Chad's wife at the time. And we've been reading about this case, we've been studying this case, but I come back to this sort of basic plot here. And the basic plot is that in October of 2018, Lori Vallow, who's this suburban housewife, sort of super mom, goes to this fringe religious conference, and she meets this author of doomsday novels, Chad Daybell. And according to witnesses, according to text messages and emails, this was love at first sight. That's October of 2019. By 1 year later, Lori's husband is dead, Lori's two children are dead, and Chad Daybell's wife is dead. And Lori and Chad are in Hawaii dancing on the beach. That's what this case boils down to.
And it was interesting during trial, the prosecution really tried to stay away from those fringe religious beliefs. They tried to keep the focus, what did they say in the opening, on sex, money, power. That's what they said, why this had happened.
And then the defense, in its closing arguments, the defense brings up the religious beliefs and puts more of a microscope on that. The defense says, look, this was Chad Daybell, who was the head of these of this small religion, this sort of cult that he was creating, that he converted Lori, that he converted these followers. And they said, show us a text message, show us something that has Lori directing any of this. And there were none. But as it turned out, the jury didn't believe that there needed to be any. So I do think that we have some sound from outside of the courtroom. Let's go to that now. I think that's Larry Woodcock with his reaction.
attention in
right.
court.
Okay,
I want to
so
personally
we are
thank
going
and
to
I want to
wrap
personally
this
hug
up now,
every
but
one
we
of
have-
those jurors.
We have a lot more.
What they went through.
Today. So, yeah, there we go. So we're going to wrap this up now, but we have a lot more for you as the day goes on Arizona's Family News at 4. We're going to have more news and analysis and reaction to today's stunning, maybe not a surprise that it was a guilty verdict, but stunning that the verdict came down so quickly.
Yes, and then of course, you know, Chad Daybell, he's going to be tried sometime next year, 2024.
Yeah, so we have a Chad Daybell trial coming up. We have potentially Lori Vallow, it looks like, now coming here to face charges. And there are also some other loose ends on this case, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see other charges coming down the pipe. The one thing that we have learned about this case is that there are always new developments. There have been, and we expect there to be. So we will say goodbye for now, and we'll see you on Arizona's Family News at 4.
Thanks for watching Arizona. Thanks for watching Arizona's Family. Watch us live wherever you are. Our mobile and streaming news app. You can also watch us on Roku, Apple TV, Fire TV, and Android TV. Subscribe on YouTube for live breaking news and